mit Blick auf die Uhr frage ich kurz am Panel, ob es Reaktionen gibt, Kommentare. Ansonsten würde ich gleich Ihnen das Wort überlassen. Yes, questions can be in English and German. Patricia will answer in English.
I think I answer in
Genau.
Yeah.
Gibt es Fragen, Anmerkungen?
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you very much for a great interview and a very interesting, critical Auseinandersetzung. I wanted to reflect on the reference to identity and clothes. And the question of as a limiting expression oder Befreiung, Selbstbefreiung durch diese Serien von Bilder und auch in relation to Ruth Beckermann, because you brought in a lot of work that she has done with her own identity as a Jewish filmmaker in Vienna. Does this perspective of the other woman, but from another culture, makes a difference in relation to coming to terms with women's emancipation, with questions in a more political perspective, on the a gaze and kind of an anthropological gaze on the culture, or looking back into Iran? Yeah. From the perspective of a Georgian artist, this double perspective, does it make an issue in relation to constructing new identities or reworking identities? If you refer back to Jeanette Fisher and her saying that the tun and the ich and this kind of action taking and making your identity, widening it, allowing you to breathe, Selbstbefriedigung. These references, is it making the difference between culture coming from different cultures or as an outsider in a certain culture?
Do you want me to start? Yeah, so it's very interesting because with Ruth Beckermann, of course, she's written Unzugehörig, the essay booklet. And yes, I do think particularly in her case, it makes a difference between, there's this mixture between to belong, but also unbelonging, not belonging to a culture. And I think if your identity is another than belonging to a culture, then you do have a different kind of perspective. It's very interesting. But this Unzugehörig, I find it really interesting. And it's got, of course, the word zugehörig, to belong, but also not to belong. But there is also a thing around hörig sein, also to listening is in there, but also to a more dominant notion of to follow something and somebody. And unzugehörig in there, and this is what you are talking about, is this not listening to one's dictates, the patriarchal dictates specifically. And I think she's critical of patriarchy per se, so in different cultural contexts.
Ist es okay? Also die Frage, darf ich fragen, also die Frage, also ist jetzt Identität, meine Identität, die Suche nach Identität jetzt? Diese Begrenzung und diese von anderen Inneren und diese Erniedrigung durch diese, wie viel zahlt man für eine gestorbene Frau, wie viel mehr zahlt man für eine gestorbene, diese Sachen sind irgendwie ein Teil von dieser Auseinandersetzung, welchen Wert habe ich in einer anderen Gesellschaft oder in einer anderen Kultur, kann ich durch diese Auseinandersetzung auch als Künstlerin diese Identität zu erforschen? Also ehrlich gesagt, ich habe, wie ich begonnen zu arbeiten, habe nicht so darüber, ich bin eine Künstlerin, nicht darüber nachgedacht, jetzt, du bist, also wenn du in so einem Land aufwächst,
wo dir ständig überall vorgeschrieben wird, wie du dich zu benehmen hast und was du tun musst. Ich glaube nicht, dass das eine normale Identitätsfindung stattfindet. Also ich glaube, sie als Psychologin wahrscheinlich besser sich auskennen als ich, Künstlerin. Aber natürlich, also ich bin im Iran geboren und aufgewachsen. Ich war das erste Mal mit 20 Jahren in Österreich frei. Und ich bin noch immer nach 23 Jahren, ertappe mich noch in diese Rahmen, bin ständig nach der Suche und auch das Thema Zugehörigkeit. Also ich bin wahrscheinlich jetzt, ich sage oft, zu sehr Österreicherin geworden, um Iranerin zu sein. Und auf der anderen Seite bin ich noch zu sehr Iranerin, um Österreicherin zu sein. Ich fühle mich beide Länder zugehörig. Und dann gibt es Momente, wo ich mich keiner dieser Länder zugehörig finde. Also ich glaube, diese Suche nach Identität findet noch immer statt. Und
ist das eine gute Position für dich, wenn ich sagen darf, oder ist das eine schwierige?
Also jetzt in meisten Fällen, glaube ich, sehe ich es als positiv, weil ich in 2 komplett unterschiedliche Länder aufgewachsen bin und es erweitert einem den Horizont. Aber gewisse Dinge, vor allem Dinge, die man erlebt hat, hin und wieder denke ich mir, wäre auch vielleicht, ist schwierig. Ja, ich überlege, also ich denke darüber nach, wie wäre es, wenn ich woanders aufgewachsen wäre oder Menschen generell. Also wie wäre das Land heuer im Jahr 2023, wenn Mullahs jetzt seit 43 Jahren nicht an Macht gewesen wären. Und, ja.
Also gewisse Dinge kann man nicht mit dem Label, es ist schön, eine erweiterte Identität zu haben, verbrämen.
Ja.
Thank you.
Thank you for a really fascinating panel. And I have a question for you, Patricia. Let's see if I can articulate I have loads of questions, but I'll try to sort of collect them into 1 or 2 questions. So I'm struck by the performance of desire, I suppose, in this film, and I'm wondering if you think that there's that the film is making a comment on the sort of, I mean, it's interesting that they are all performing a literary text, right? That they are, or a text at least. I'm not sure how literary it is, but and that do you read that as a kind of example of the performative nature of desire? That desire itself comes from, the way that it is, I mean, that desire is performative in the sense that we kind of learn and repeat desire, and that it becomes misogyny basically is constituted by its repetition and not by a sort of natural inclination in men, but a sort of cultural script that is being repeated over and over again. So that's one question. It doesn't look like you agree, but
it's a difficult question. Yeah.
So and the second question has to do with humor, because it seemed to me from the trailer as if, I mean, it read as quite sort of, I mean, absurd is maybe the word, but also that these men themselves find it kind of hilarious that, what they're reading, but also they seem really awkward, like they don't know how to sort of, I mean, the singing seems to be a way of kind of coming to terms with the awkwardness of this text, at the same time as it's maybe a kind of release of pleasure, even this kind of singing this sexist kind of narrative. So I was just wondering if you have if you can explain what that humor or sort of the laughter there does it reinforce the misogyny, or does it undercut it?
I think sorry to,
No,
because this is just, this is really interesting. I think Beckermann asks us about, you know, who are we as the public who is watching this? What are they performing? Is it okay to have a good laugh when we're reading something which is about child pornography? Because that's what it is, you know, very fundamentally. And she really, for me personally, what she shows is how easily we are led into this kind of, it's actually quite funny. And it's not funny. It's actually not funny. And there are awkwardnesses, but perhaps this is how patriarchy also works, that things are a little bit awkward, that we like to have a little laugh, and suddenly things are easily represented. So I'm not sure, because when I was watching it, I was sitting there in the cinema, in the dark cinema, being terribly embarrassed, actually. I was so embarrassed, and it just didn't stop. It's the relentlessness of hearing this, you know, these kinds of sexual acts being read out. It does not stop. Like with pornography, you know, she just repeats the kind of pornographic text. She's very interesting, Beckermann, how she constructs the scene and the obscene. And and then there are these moments where you, actually, this is quite funny. Actually, I feel very sorry for these blokes. They don't know what they are talking about. Oh, they are. And it's this frailty of masculinity. It's exactly that, where she is showing masculinity is not very strong. But once you bundle them together into that kind of chanting, it really does literally drown out the female voice. And I think what she's... I think what is happening is that this drowning out of the female voice happens in all sorts of situations in our culture, in all sorts of situations. Sometimes it's clear, like when you have got a pile of men shouting together, which happens a lot as well. Sometimes it's more subtle as well. And it also, on that note, if I may say so, it also happens as we are cultural producers, and we really have to choose what are we representing, who are we speaking for, who are we allowing to speak, because there is a question. And this is going to be a little bit off the track, but I've been to a couple of exhibitions here. And one of the exhibitions I haven't been to, but I saw advertised in big is George Basilitz's exhibition. The man who said that women are not good painters. And actually, because I was checking it out, he also said that they are not great musicians either. So are we giving them space, these kinds of statements, are we giving them space to talk? Is the Kunsthistorische Museum, for all its space, we could have given that over to a great woman artist. Like Orlan, for example, we could have given that to a great woman artist. Why have we decided as a culture to yet again let the men talk who had a lot of space and a lot of voice? So it's that kind of, I don't find it funny, actually. I don't think Mutzenbacher is funny. I think the humor is something where we then should really reflect on what are we laughing here, you know, what are we laughing at? Yeah,
and if I can just respond, it seems to me as if it's a kind of commentary on the perhaps tendency to laugh off misogynistic culture, you know, like, oh, it was just a joke, and you know, feminists can't understand a joke or whatever. Then, you know, the whole, I mean, that's of course what Sarah Ahmed is kind of doing with a feminist killjoy, that you know, we have to say this is actually not funny, and and these glib comments do harm, you know, even though they seem kind of, oh, it was just a joke or whatever. So I think that seemed to me to be
And we had a little conversation before about that Ruth Beckermann trapped. So somebody said that to you that, oh, she trapped the man, trapped the man into. And I thought about that. I thought about that, and I thought, well, who is being trapped into reading out a child pornographic text for a casting call? And what kind of, you know, that is not a trap. They knew what they were entering, and they were still entering into that thing. And then they were signing off that they want to be seen as well.
Just add something because it's related to that. I mean, you just mentioned that we talked about that before, and I actually saw Mutzenbacher at the premiere at Biennale Film Festival, and it was even more than that. There were some men participating in the movie theater, and actually there was a lot of laughter during the film. And afterwards, they even stood up and they were actually really proud of what they were saying on camera. So, I mean, I think there is just something that is so disturbing in it.
I'm sorry, but there's something not right. Yeah.
We have a question of Lisa.
I was asking myself if you could probably provide a little bit more insight into this casting process the director did, because I mean, yeah, it's completely absurd also hearing this story from the cinema. I mean, in how far did those male protagonists know what they are doing?
Well, they were called for casting of a film on Mutzenbacher, yeah. And then it was an advert in newspapers. She advertised it, and they came to the casting call. So it was an advert. They knew what Mutzenbacher was. Obviously, I mean, why would you go along to something like this? And and then I would think that at the end of it, because as we all know, you can't just show images of people. They must have signed off a release. And that is interesting what you just said, that you're actually very proud of their performances. Yeah. The mothers and the wives and the daughters. Interesting, yeah, well.
Also accepted like the man, then this is not good, no? Because then that means patriarchat is also represented by women, unfortunately. I don't know how they
absolutely. We are, it's patriarchy isn't separate, just as much as, patriarchy is it's an ideology, it's a system. It's not separate from women. We are contributing it, but that's why I'm saying we need to watch a little bit what we are contributing to, what we as cultural producers, what we are allowing to speak, because we are, we are powerful women here. We've got a voice. We write art history, we curate exhibitions. We can choose what we want to show, what we want to talk about.
And what I think is really interesting is in the comparing the work of Soli and Mutzenbacher, so that in general, this our feeling in the Western world is also, if we have Trump and all these sexists, that Iran and what happens with women there and how women form their protests are something very different from our world, but it is not.
No, not at all.
It's simply not. And I think that that was because we choose and asked Soli Kiani to participate, because what is also learning, and it's not since only some years, that we really, like Akoa Humayompo describes in her book also, Mourning, Persia Melancholia.
So she wrote a book about doing psychoanalysis in Tehran.
In Tehran, no, but yeah, mourning about mourning.
It's on the TV.
Yeah, I forgot the exact title. Yeah. So it's about that. We really, like Zizek also pointed out some month ago, that we really should learn from the women in Tehran and in Iran, how they protest, so that from the girls, and also artists who try to explore their messages. Okay. So and to be aware. So Mutzenbacher is very helpful to be aware that that is a very current problem we have, and but we accept too easily the way how we spoke with each other, or the tone. So.
No, I actually want to close, but I think Monika touched something very critical here about the subjection of women and bodies, and Soli Kiani works with the body in an amazing, evocative way, where you see that she challenges also the sexual stereotypes of women. Like, it's not classical beauty; it's about rethinking the subjection of women through the process of repression, etc.
And with the help of men.
The protest, you mean?
Yes. To remodel that together. So that's a very important point.
Yeah. And I wondered about the idea of the gaze of Ruth Beckermann, on these men, because they're asking her, she's giving orders, she's looking at them, she's positioning them on the sofa. It's almost like trap, sorry to say, but it's the female trap that she's preparing for them. And she also has this fascist background images that she worked, or Leni Riefenstahl, and she reworks it into them. So it's a kind of like the challenging of the stereotype of the sexy object. It's a kind of a confrontation with a fascist object. Yeah. And so you have two different ways of reading it. Yeah. So the idea of us as cultural producers, Ruth Beckermann definitely has a voice here that is loud and clear. It's not always understandable by the men, probably, who were into this. Maybe there should have been a better dialogue there. Or afterwards, like a group meeting and asking, have you been aware of what's going on here? And the same, I mean, in regard to challenging sex, like I'm coming back to Jan Fischer and also Kiki Kogelnik. You both had to say several times they were not a feminist artist. But it's almost obvious that they were challenging a lot of the stereotypes about women. Like I told you, I mean, this idea of sitting in a bride's gown, white dress, another woman, and a power. It looked to me a bit like a power struggle between her, even though you said that it was a kind of a compassion and there was a lot of transference and Klärung. But also with Kiki Kogelnik, she uses fashion in order with the scissors to basically to disturb her eyes. It's not something that we are going to enjoy looking at her dressed with a miniskirt and a flowery miniskirt. It's about us looking at her really, really miniskirt, like with a weapon in her hands, like definitely not a self-fulfilling desire. So feminists, not in a classical way that they are promoting agenda of feminists, feminism, but definitely challenging the sexual stereotypes, very much like Soli Kiani in many ways, with this Ermächtigung. You know, this is a great, everybody I showed this, immediately they figured out this I think, gesture of Ermächtigung. So it's not a classical feminist. You will not brand it. Maybe feminist will be even a belittling approach, but definitely a challenging of the stereotypes, of the sexist, of the object of desire.
But I think, I personally don't know any artist who says I'm a feminist artist. It's about labeling. It's about labeling. The same goes for, contemporary artists. They don't say I'm a painter because they use all different kinds of media and they don't want to be reduced only to one chapter or one technique. So I think this is a fair point. And
I think Gabriele was.
Zum Begriff Feminismus und I'm a Feminist Artist. Also da gibt es einige Künstlerinnen, die damit überhaupt kein Problem haben. Ich weiß nicht, ich glaube, dass auch jüngere, aber jetzt zum Beispiel die Ausstellung in der Vertikalen Galerie zu Hollande, die ist 75, also sie erklärt das ganz genau, warum sie absolut eine feministische Künstlerin ist. Es gibt auch Valley Export, also auf jeden Fall die Generation, die in den 70er Jahren feministische Kunst gemacht haben, die haben mit diesem Terminus kein Problem.
Bitte.
Aber ich glaube nicht, dass das jetzt bei allen Künstlerinnen historisch ist und dass die alle das Kind mit dem Bart ausschütten und sagen, pfui, Feminismus, Igitt, was ist das? Und wenn es so ist, dann wäre es eher ein Problem, weil dann sollen sie ein bisschen die Geschichte sich anschauen.
Verschiedene Strategien gegen Gewalt und gegen diese Subjection, das Monika erwähnt hat. Und welche Strategien haben in verschiedene Immigrantinnen, Exilantinnen etc. entwickelt haben. Ob man nennt es Feminismus oder nicht, das ist etwas extra. Ja? Dass wir benutzen es für unsere Arbeiten vielleicht. Das ist, es macht unsere Arbeit einfacher, aber das bedeutet nicht, dass wir können das auf Feminismus reduzieren. Das ist eine biografische Auseinandersetzung. Das habe ich gemeint.
Genau, Soli Kiani möchte.
Ja. Darf ich was dazu sagen? Also wenn man meine Arbeit kennt oder sieht man, dass ich feministische Themen, Feministin bin und feministische Themen auch mache. Aber ich bin in einem Land aufgewachsen, wo ständig zwischen verschiedene Gender Segregation durchgeführt wurde und damit habe ich ehrlich gesagt ein Problem und das ist, glaube ich, auch einer der Gründe, warum Feminismus, wenn man, also nicht in allen Gesellschaften, aber ich habe es oft in Europa erlebt, dass die Menschen auch die Augen verdrehen und deswegen ist mir sehr, sehr wichtig, dass ich benenne, auch dass in Ländern so wie Iran Männer genauso wie Frauen auf die Straße sehen und es ist ja auch, ich denke mir auch oft, ob das nicht gut wäre, die Frauenrechte nicht von Menschenrechten trennen. Wir sind Menschen, also ich glaube, es ist ein Teil davon. Wir haben natürlich die Probleme und also die Freiheiten, die wir hier genießen sind die Errungenschaften, die feministischen Bewegungen. Aber die Frage ist, ob man nicht darüber nachdenken sollte, dass man als ein Ding sieht, also Menschenrechte und nicht trennen. Also ich bin in so einem Land aufgewachsen und tue mir ein bisschen damit schwierig und deswegen erwähne ich immer, Thema meiner Arbeit ist nicht vorhandene Menschenrechte im Iran. Und das sind Kindesrechte, Minderheiten, Frauenrechte, Männerrechte, LGBTQ, alles dabei. Und also weil wir vorhin über Künstlerinnen gesprochen haben, das ist einer der Gründe, wo ich mir schwer tue, wenn man mich nur als feministische Künstlerin darf ich bezeichnen. Also für mich gehört alles zusammen und daher wollte ich das nur erwähnen.
Gut. Wir sind jetzt in der komfortablen Situation, dass es noch einen letzten Programmpunkt gibt, nämlich Elisabeth Schäfer, die, wir haben es als Schlussbetrachtungen bezeichnet, eben ihre Schlussbetrachtungen präsentieren wird. Großartigerweise auch ganz kurzfristig auf Englisch. So Elisabeth will give her final considerations in English so that all the speakers also and all the audience can follow.